The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Kensington Palace, casting long shadows across the polished floors. William stood in the drawing room, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the gardens come alive with the dawn. The weight of recent days pressed heavily on his shoulders, though he maintained the composed exterior expected of someone in his position. Kate had been unwell, not in the way that made headlines or caused public concern, but in a quieter, more personal manner that only those closest to her truly understood. The past months had been a whirlwind of medical appointments, consultations, and careful management of public appearances. Through it all, she had maintained her characteristic grace, never allowing the outside world to glimpse the private struggles within the palace walls. The household staff moved quietly through the corridors, their footsteps muffled by centuries-old carpets. They had witnessed many moments of both triumph and sorrow within these walls, but something about the current atmosphere felt different. There was a tension, an unspoken understanding that significant words needed to be shared between the couple who had captured the world's imagination. William's mind drifted to their early days together at St. Andrews University. How different life had been then, when they were simply two students navigating young love away from the spotlight. He remembered late-night study sessions, walks along the Scottish coast, and the gradual realization that their connection was something extraordinary. Those memories felt both distant and immediate, like photographs that captured not just images but entire emotional landscapes. The sound of footsteps drew his attention. Kate entered the room, dressed simply but elegantly as always. Despite the challenges she faced, there was a strength in her bearing that had always impressed him. She moved with purpose, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that suggested this conversation had been carefully considered. "William," she began, her voice steady but carrying an undertone of emotion. "We need to talk about something important." He turned fully to face her, noting the way the morning light illuminated her features. There was something in her expression that made his heart quicken with apprehension. Throughout their years together, he had learned to read her subtle cues, the way she held herself when bearing difficult news or preparing for challenging conversations. The palace, with all its grandeur and history, suddenly felt intimate and small. This room had witnessed countless significant moments in royal history, but for William, none felt as personally momentous as what was about to unfold. He gestured for her to sit, joining her on the antique sofa that had been a wedding gift from a foreign dignitary. Kate took a breath, gathering her thoughts. The medical reports, the consultations, the careful planning, it all led to this moment. She had rehearsed different ways to approach the subject, but now, facing her husband, the carefully prepared words seemed inadequate for the magnitude of what she needed to convey. "The doctors have given me their final assessment," she said, her hands folded carefully in her lap. "And I need you to understand what this means for us, for our family, and for our future." William felt his chest tighten. The word "final" carried a weight that seemed to press down on the room itself. He reached for her hand, a gesture that transcended their public roles and spoke to the fundamental connection between them as partners, parents, and best friends. The story of their relationship had always been one of mutual support and understanding. From the early days when the press speculation about their romance reached fever pitch, to their spectacular wedding that captivated millions, to the birth of their children and the assumption of greater royal responsibilities. Through it all, they had been each other's anchor. Kate squeezed his hand gently before continuing. "You know how the treatments have been going. The specialists have been wonderful, truly, but there are limitations to what modern medicine can achieve." Her voice remained remarkably steady, a testament to the inner strength that had served her well throughout her public life. The morning sun climbed higher, its rays now fully illuminating the portrait gallery visible through the doorway. Generations of royalty gazed down from gilded frames, silent witnesses to this deeply personal moment. William found himself thinking about legacy, about the responsibilities they carried not just to the crown, but to each other and their children. What exactly are they saying? William asked, his voice betraying the emotion he struggled to contain. As someone trained from birth to maintain composure in all circumstances, the personal had always been his greatest challenge. With Kate, he had learned to be vulnerable, to share the fears and hopes that his public role often required him to suppress. Kate shifted slightly, choosing her words with care. The prognosis isn't what we hoped. The treatments have helped, certainly, but the underlying condition. She paused, seeing the impact of her words on his face. We need to think about how we want to spend our time, what really matters to us as a family. The implications hung in the air between them. William's mind raced through practical considerations, the children's schedules, royal duties, public appearances, while his heart grappled with the emotional reality of what Kate was telling him. The careful balance they had always maintained between public duty and private life suddenly seemed more precious and precarious than ever. How long? The question emerged almost as a whisper, the two words carrying the weight of all their shared dreams and plans. Kate's expression softened. The doctors won't give exact timelines. You know how they are. But they've been clear that we need to make the most of the time we have to focus on what truly matters. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes never leaving his. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Not the medical details. We can review those with the team. But about us, about what comes next. The palace had seen its share of difficult conversations over the centuries. Kings and queens had made decisions that shaped nations within these walls. But for William, this conversation with his wife held a significance that transcended even royal duty. This was about the person who had transformed his understanding of partnership, who had brought warmth and accessibility to an institution often perceived as distant and formal. Their children's laughter echoed faintly from another part of the palace, a sound that brought both joy and poignancy to the moment. George, Charlotte, and Louis represented not just the future of the monarchy, but the living testament to William and Kate's love. The thought of how this would affect them added another layer of complexity to an already overwhelming situation. "I've been thinking about my mother," William said quietly, the admission carrying years of unspoken grief. About how sudden it all was, how there were so many things left unsaid. Diana's absence had shaped much of his adult life, informing his approach to both public service and private relationships. "I won't let that happen with us." Kate nodded, understanding the deep significance of his words. She had helped him process that grief over the years, had been there for the anniversaries and the moments when the loss felt fresh again. Now, faced with their own challenge, that shared understanding provided a foundation for the difficult conversations ahead. "That's exactly why we need to talk about everything now," she agreed. "The children need to know they're loved and supported whatever happens. The foundation work we've started needs to continue. And you—" She paused, gathering courage for what she needed to say next. "You need to know that I want you to find happiness, always. Promise me that." The request hung between them, loaded with implications about a future neither wanted to contemplate. William's jaw tightened, his natural instinct to reject the premise warring with the recognition that Kate needed to voice these thoughts, needed to know that her wishes were heard and understood. The morning had progressed, and the palace was now fully awake. Somewhere, staff were preparing for the day's engagements, unaware that in this quiet room, the future was being reshaped by a conversation between two people who had never asked for the spotlight, but had learned to use it in service of others. "Tell me what you need," William said, his voice stronger now, infused with the determination that had carried him through other challenges. "Not what you think I want to hear, not what protocol suggests. What do you need?" Kate's eyes glistened with unshed tears, the first crack in her composed exterior. "Time," she said simply. "Time with you and the children, away from the cameras and the obligations. Time to create memories they can carry with them. Time to ensure the causes we care about will continue to thrive." She took a breath. "And I need to know that you'll be okay, that you won't let this define you the way your mother's loss did." The parallel to Diana was inescapable. William had been shaped by loss, had built walls that Kate had patiently dismantled over their years together. The thought of him retreating back behind those walls, of their children experiencing the same defining absence he had endured, clearly weighed on her. "We'll take that time," William promised, his mind already working through the practical arrangements. "The engagement calendar can be adjusted. The staff will understand. The public." He trailed off, knowing that public understanding was both likely and irrelevant compared to his family's needs. "The public has always been more understanding than we sometimes give them credit for," Kate observed. "They've supported us through so much already." She was thinking of the early days, when every gesture was scrutinized, every appearance analyzed. Over time, she had found her voice and her place, becoming beloved not for fitting a predetermined mold, but for bringing her authentic self to the role. The conversation continued as the sun traced its path across the sky. They discussed practical matters, treatment schedules, children's routines, the delegation of various patronages, and responsibilities. But interwoven with these logistics were deeper themes: love, legacy, the meaning of a life well lived, and the impact one person can have simply by being genuine in a world that often demands performance. William found himself studying Kate's face as she spoke, memorizing the way she gestured when making a particularly important point, the slight tilt of her head when considering a difficult question. These were details he had noticed countless times before, but which now seemed precious in their potential finitude. "There's something else," Kate said as the conversation began to wind down. "Something I've been wanting to say, but haven't found the right moment." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the gardens where their children often played. "It's about the role, about being Princess of Wales." William joined her at the window, standing close enough to provide support without crowding her need for space to articulate her thoughts. The title she bore had come with immense historical weight and public expectation. She had navigated it with a grace that made it look effortless, though he knew the reality was far more complex. "I've been thinking about what it means to serve in this role when facing personal challenges," she continued. "Your mother showed that vulnerability could be a strength, that connecting with people's pain made the connection more real. I want to continue that, but in my own way." The mention of Diana in this context was particularly poignant. She had transformed public expectations of royal behavior, showing that duty and emotional authenticity were not mutually exclusive. Kate had built on that foundation while establishing her own approach, one that balanced openness with the privacy their family needed. "Whatever you decide, I'll support it," William assured her. "We've always been strongest when we've been true to ourselves rather than trying to fit others' expectations." Kate turned to face him fully, and, in her expression, he saw not just his wife, but his partner in every sense of the word. "That's what I wanted to talk about. The final words, as it were, though. I hope we have many more conversations ahead. I want us to approach this next phase with intention, not just reaction, to show that facing challenges with grace doesn't mean hiding from them." The weight of her words settled over them both. This was not just about personal struggle, but about how that struggle could be transformed into something meaningful for others facing similar challenges. It was about taking a private pain and finding within it a public purpose, all while protecting the sacred space of family life. As the morning gave way to afternoon, their conversation had covered vast emotional territory. From practical concerns to philosophical reflections, from memories of the past to hopes for an uncertain future, they had laid bare the contents of their hearts. The palace walls, which had witnessed so much history, now held these words too, not proclamations or decrees, but the intimate exchange between two people facing an unwanted journey together. William pulled Kate close, a gesture that needed no words. In that embrace was everything: gratitude for the years they'd shared, sorrow for the challenges ahead, determination to face whatever came with the same partnership that had defined their relationship from the beginning. The final words she had spoken would echo in his mind, not as an ending, but as a framework for moving forward with purpose and love. The children's voices grew louder, suggesting they were approaching. Soon, The private moment would give way to family time, to the beautiful chaos of young lives that knew nothing of the conversation that had just taken place. Kate and William separated slightly, but remained connected, hands clasped as they prepared to greet their children with smiles that were genuine if tinged with a deeper awareness. As George, Charlotte, and Louis burst into the room with the uncontained energy of youth, the palace transformed from a setting for difficult conversations to what it had become under William and Kate's influence, a home. The children chatter about their morning activities, their plans for the afternoon, their questions about upcoming events filled the space with life and possibility. Kate knelt to embrace each child in turn, her movements betraying nothing of the morning's weighty discussion. William watched, struck by her ability to compartmentalize, to be fully present for their children despite the burden she carried. It was a skill she had developed over years in the public eye, but it had never been more poignant than in this moment. The family moved together toward the private dining room for lunch, the children's excitement about favorite foods and afternoon plans creating a buffer of normalcy around the adults' heavier knowledge. As they walked, Kate caught William's eye, a silent communication passing between them. The conversation would continue. There would be many more discussions, decisions, and difficult moments ahead. But for now, there was this, a family lunch, children's laughter, and the precious ordinary moments that make up a life. The palace, with all its history and grandeur, faded into the background. What remained was the essential love, family, and the determination to face whatever came with grace and purpose. Kate's final words from their morning conversation would indeed prove stunning in their impact. Not because they were dramatic or unexpected, but because they reframed everything that followed. They were words about living fully despite limitations, about finding meaning in challenge, about the power of love to transcend even the most difficult circumstances. As the family settled around the lunch table, the children's animated conversation providing a soundtrack of normalcy, William and Kate shared another glance. And it was acknowledgement of the morning's conversation, but also something more, a commitment to making every moment count, to building memories that would sustain them all through whatever lay ahead. The palace moment had been emotional indeed, but it had also been transformative, setting the stage for a new chapter that would be written with intention, love, and the kind of courage that comes from facing hard truths together.